At my baby shower, I thought I was finally safe. 30 years old, carrying my first child and surrounded by pastel balloons, vanilla cake, and family who smiled as if love had always been between us. Mark held my hand with pride, his eyes glowing with the hope of the life we were about to begin. For one fragile moment, I believed this was what happiness felt like. Then Rachel. My sister pressed a glass of orange juice into my hand. Her perfume was heavy, her smile too polished. "You need to keep your energy up, sis," she said. I did not ask for the drink, but I accepted it, telling myself perhaps she wanted to help. The first sip was fine, the second tasted faintly bitter. By the third, my head felt light. The chandelier above blurred, spinning in circles while voices around me turned to distant echoes. My knees trembled, my breath caught. I gripped the edge of the table, desperate to steady myself. Rachel leaned close, her lips grazing my ear, her whisper slicing through the haze. "This baby will ruin you just like you ruined my life." Her words poisoned me faster than whatever she had slipped into my drink. My heart pounded, my body collapsed, and I saw Mark's face shift from joy to terror as he rushed forward. "Emily, stay with me, breathe, please. Breathe," his voice begged. The guests gasped. Chairs scraped back, hands fluttered in panic. I tried to speak to tell them Rachel had done this, but my tongue felt heavy, my chest tight, and the air would not come. Rachel knelt beside me, her expression switching to false concern in an instant. "Poor Emily," she murmured loudly. "Pregnancy can be so hard, she always overreacts." Her tone dripped with innocence, but her eyes flashed a victory only I could see. My parents arrived, my mother clutching her pearls, my father booming in command. "She is fine, just tired," he declared. "Stop this nonsense." Rachel would never hurt her. Gaslighting wrapped around me like chains, crushing me more than the dizziness. Even as my child fluttered in fear inside me, even as I lay on the floor, unable to breathe, they defended her. The betrayal was complete, sharp, undeniable. Balloons floated above me like cruel decorations, ribbons brushed my cheek, and the laughter that had filled the room just minutes before curdled into whispers. Darkness crept into the corners of my vision. I thought of my baby, of the life I had sworn to protect, and clung to one final thought as the haze consumed me. If I survive this, I will never stay silent again. My story did not begin at my baby shower, nor did Rachel's venom spring out of nowhere. It was rooted deep in the soil of our childhood, watered by years of favoritism and neglect, and fertilized by the lies our parents told themselves and us. My father, Charles Parker, was the kind of man who filled a room with his voice. Not his warmth. He believed authority was respect, and control was love. My mother, Linda, smiled at his every word, nodded at his judgments, and stood behind him even when he was wrong, which was most of the time. Rachel, 3 years older than me, learned early that siding with them meant power. She was the golden child, the one who could do no wrong, the one whose tantrums were excused as passion and whose selfishness was excused as ambition. I, Emily, was the shadow tolerated, but never celebrated, expected to bend, to absorb the weight of their moods, and to stay quiet. My earliest memories of Rachel are not of sisterly games or shared secrets, but of sharp words and broken things. I was 6 when I saved coins in a tin can to buy myself a small plastic doll from the corner store. I kept that can under my bed, counting the nickels with the kind of joy only a child can feel. One morning, I woke to find the can empty and the doll in Rachel's hands. She twirled it by the hair, smirking when I cried. She said I was selfish, that family meant sharing. When I ran to my parents, Linda scolded me for being dramatic. Charles barked that Rachel deserved it more because she was older. That pattern repeated over and over, me trying to build something for myself. Rachel tearing it down, and our parents insisting it was my fault for expecting fairness. By the time I was 10, I had learned to stop expecting justice in that house. Birthdays were lessons in humiliation. My cakes were smaller, my gifts cheaper, and if I dared ask why, the answer was always the same: Rachel needs more. Rachel deserves more. Rachel is the future. I remember one night when Rachel had torn the pages from my sketchbook because I had drawn a picture she wanted to copy for school. Charles found us in the hallway, and when I told him she destroyed my work, he looked at me with tired eyes and said, "Emily, stop competing with your sister. It is unbecoming." as if wanting my own things, my own pride was competition. At 12, I began to hide money in my shoes, folding dollar bills from babysitting into the soles, hoping Rachel would not discover them. Sometimes she did anyway, slipping into my room laughing when I cried, throwing the bills into the air like confetti before stomping out. When I begged my mother for help, she said, "You must not provoke her, she is sensitive." Sensitive, they called it, but to me it felt like cruelty sharpened by indulgence. School became my refuge, the one place where effort mattered more than favoritism. Teachers praised me for my essays, for my diligence, for my hunger to learn. Rachel hated that she would sneer, "No one likes a try-hard Emily. You will never be better than me." She was wrong, and she knew it, which only deepened her spite. At 14, Rachel started dating boys who drove her around in old cars and smoked behind the gym. When she stayed out late, my parents raged, but not at her. They turned their anger toward me, accusing me of distracting her, of failing to set a good example though I was younger. That was the rhythm of my life, blame without reason, responsibility without power. I began to wonder if perhaps I really was the problem, if my presence in that house poisoned everything. The only solace came from small acts of rebellion, hiding in the library for hours, writing stories in secret notebooks, and dreaming of a world where I could breathe without fear of being told I was too much or not enough. One memory still claws at me, one that taught me family could be more dangerous than strangers. I was 15 when I landed my first part-time job at a diner, wiping tables and earning tips that I stored carefully in an envelope inside a textbook. That money was meant for a school trip, my chance to see Washington, D.C. with classmates. Rachel found it, of course she did, and when I came home from school one afternoon, she was gone along with the envelope. She returned hours later with a new jacket, smug as always. When I confronted her, she shrugged and said, "You would not have looked good on that trip anyway." I turned to my parents, shaking with anger, and Charles slapped the table so hard the plates rattled. "Enough," he thundered, "do not stir up drama." Rachel needed that jacket. Stop acting like money matters more than family. My trip was gone, my dignity shattered, and all I learned was that in our house, theft was family loyalty if Rachel committed it. That night, I cried into my pillow, not just for the money, but for the realization that the people who should have taught me love had only taught me betrayal. Yet even in that despair, a seed of determination began to grow. I promised myself I would not depend on them forever, that I would escape. At 16, I picked up extra shifts at the diner, saving for college applications, telling no one about my plans. Rachel mocked me daily, calling me a nerd, a failure waiting to happen. My parents echoed her doubts, warning that college was expensive, that I should stay home, maybe find work nearby, maybe help Rachel with her plans instead. But I had already glimpsed a life beyond their reach, and I clung to it fiercely. By 17, I had filled out scholarship forms by flashlight, praying over envelopes before slipping them into the mailbox. I knew Rachel was watching, her eyes sharp with envy, her whispers cutting, but I also knew I could not let her stop me. Looking back now, I see that the baby shower betrayal was not an isolated act. It was the culmination of decades of resentment and cruelty. Rachel's decision to spike my drink to whisper that my baby would ruin me was the final verse in a song she had been singing since childhood. And my parents' denial that day, their willingness to protect her at my expense, was simply the chorus they had repeated all my life. The backstory of my pain is not just about sibling rivalry. It is about the soil that raised us, poisoned with favoritism and denial, until betrayal was not shocking but inevitable. Leaving that house became my only goal, my oxygen, the one dream that kept me alive through those suffocating teenage years. By 16, I was already working as many hours as the law allowed, bussing tables before dawn, babysitting until midnight, stuffing crumpled bills into a shoebox under my bed, praying Rachel would never find it. She tried, of course, rifling through my drawers, mocking me when she found only scraps of paper and sneering that no college would ever want me. Her jealousy burned hotter the more I fought to rise, and my parents fanned the flames. Charles shook his head, muttering that girls like me were better off staying close to family, while Linda suggested I follow Rachel's example, maybe find a man with steady work. They never once asked what I wanted. My heart pounded with a mixture of fear and determination. Fear that they were right, and determination to prove them wrong. I studied late into the night, books open on my lap. Eyelids heavy, but resolve sharper than ever. Teachers saw me. They praised my essays, encouraged me to apply for scholarships, and for the first time, I felt a sliver of validation that could not be stolen by Rachel's envy or my parents' neglect. At 17, I received the letter that changed everything, a full scholarship to a state university several hours away. I clutched the envelope in my trembling hands, tears streaming down my face, not just because of what it promised, but because it was mine, something no one in my family could take away. Rachel stormed into my room when she saw me crying, ripped the letter from my hands, and shouted, "You think you are better than us, Emily. You think leaving makes you smarter." I snatched it back, my voice steady for the first time in years. "Yes, Rachel. I do think I am better than this, better than being trapped." For once, she had no reply. My parents tried to guilt me. Charles reminding me of the chores I would abandon, Linda sighing about how much Rachel needed me, but I packed anyway. On the morning I left, I had $342 in my pocket, a second-hand suitcase, and a bus ticket that felt like freedom. The ride was long and uncomfortable, the bus rattling down endless stretches of highway, but with each mile I felt lighter. I promised myself I would never return except on my own terms. Those first years of independence were brutal. I shared a tiny studio apartment with 4 other girls, each of us claiming a corner and a single dresser drawer, our bathroom down the hall serving an entire floor. Privacy was a luxury none of us had, but freedom, even cramped and noisy, tasted sweeter than anything back home. I woke at 5 every morning to work the breakfast shift at a diner, hustled through classes at the university, then clocked into a retail job until 10 at night. Sleep was a rare luxury, usually no more than 4 hours, but exhaustion felt preferable to the helplessness I had known under my parents' roof. There were nights I cried quietly into my pillow, overwhelmed by debt notices, overdue, essays, and the gnawing hunger of skipped meals, but I never thought of giving up. Each step forward, however small, was mine. Professors noticed my diligence, one of them recommending me for a marketing internship during my junior year. That internship became the lifeline I had prayed for. My supervisor, Vivian, recognized a spark in me that I barely saw in myself. She mentored me, guided me through presentations, taught me the unspoken rules of corporate life, and when I doubted, she reminded me that discipline and resilience were strengths forged from struggle. By graduation, I had secured a position as a junior copywriter at a respected firm. I clutched my ID badge like it was gold proof that I belonged in a world far removed from Rachel's cruelty and my parents' suffocating control. My career advanced slowly but steadily, each promotion earned with sleepless nights, careful budgeting, and relentless focus. While colleagues bought new cars and traveled abroad, I held on to my modest sedan and one-bedroom apartment, funneling every extra dollar into savings. My friends teased me for being frugal, but they did not understand that for me savings were not just numbers, they were freedom, a shield against ever needing to beg family for help again. By 27, I was managing small campaigns. By 29, I had been promoted to content strategist, and by 30, I became a campaign manager, leading a team overseeing budgets and earning enough to breathe easier at last. Mark entered my life during those years steady, kind, and unlike anyone I had known before. He never tried to control me, never mocked my caution with money, and when I told him about my family, he listened without judgment. We married quietly, surrounded by friends instead of relatives, and for the first time I felt I had chosen my own family. Together we dreamed of a home, of future children raised in love, not control. At 30, I was promoted again senior marketing director at one of the largest firms in Seattle. My salary doubled, and for the first time I dared to imagine stability. I built a savings account that grew steadily, every dollar a monument to the battles I had fought, every statement a reminder that I had climbed from a child robbed of coins to a woman who controlled her own destiny. That independence did not erase the scars Rachel's voice still echoed in my mind. At times, my parents' gaslighting whispered that I was selfish, but with each year of discipline, those voices grew fainter. When I discovered I was pregnant, joy surged through me, a joy untainted by fear. I promised my unborn child he would never feel the betrayal I had endured. He would never wonder if his family wanted him safe. The baby shower was supposed to be the celebration of that promise, a moment of closure, proof that I had broken free. I could not know then that Rachel would turn that very celebration into a weapon, and that the independence I had built over more than a decade would be tested in the cruelest way once again. The weeks leading up to the baby shower should have been filled with excitement, yet every time I spoke with my mother Linda or my sister Rachel, a knot twisted tighter in my stomach. Linda insisted that the shower be held at the family home, the same house where I had once cried myself to sleep, the same walls that had echoed with favoritism and denial. Mark suggested we rent a hall something neutral, but my parents argued it would be ungrateful that family traditions mattered. Against my better judgment, I agreed, telling myself that maybe this time would be different. Rachel threw herself into planning, calling daily with suggestions that sounded more like commands. She wanted a pastel theme, catered food, and expensive cake. Whenever I hesitated, she mocked me, saying, "Do not be cheap, Emily. This is supposed to be special." I bit my tongue, reminding myself that soon it would be over. Friends from work offered to help Sophie especially, but Rachel waved them off, determined to control every detail. She arrived at my apartment twice a week with lists and a bossy smile, rearranging decorations I had chosen, criticizing the guest list, and making sly remarks about how tired I looked. Pregnancy was already draining her presence, made it suffocating. The morning of the shower, I woke early, placing a hand over my swollen belly and whispering to my son, "This is for you, not them." Mark kissed my forehead, telling me he would be right by my side. Still unease sat heavy as we drove to my parents' house. The moment I stepped inside, I was struck by the transformation. Streamers hung from the ceiling tables draped with linen centerpieces of flowers that Rachel claimed she had arranged, though they clearly came from a florist. Guests milled around, cooing over the decorations, praising Rachel for her efforts. She basked in the compliments, brushing past me as though I were a guest at my own celebration. I forced myself to smile, but inside I felt pushed to the margins of an event meant to honor me and my baby. Linda fluttered between rooms, bragging to neighbors about her soon-to-be grandson. Yet, when she introduced me, her tone was oddly formal, as though I were a distant relative rather than her daughter. Charles sat in the living room already pouring drinks, laughing too loudly, telling anyone who would listen that Rachel had outdone herself. My name was mentioned rarely, as though my pregnancy were simply a backdrop for Rachel's performance as hostess. When I tried to join conversations, Rachel interrupted, steering the topic back to her efforts. I caught Mark's frown, his protective hand squeezing mine under the table. As the party grew louder, Rachel appeared at my side with a drink. "You look pale, sis. You need this," she said, pressing a glass of orange juice into my hand. Something in her smile unsettled me. Sophie noticed too, raising an eyebrow, but I took the glass anyway, telling myself not to be paranoid. Rachel's sudden attentiveness, her constant hovering, her eagerness to manage what I ate and drank, all felt wrong. Yet I clung to the fragile hope that maybe, just maybe, she wanted to make peace. Guests began giving speeches, telling stories of their own baby showers, offering advice. Laughter filled the room, but beneath it all, I felt a current pulling me under. Every so often, Rachel's eyes caught mine across the table, sharp and unreadable, as if she were daring me to relax. I tried to focus on the gifts being piled high, the pastel wrapping paper, the tiny clothes folded with care, yet unease gnawed at me. Linda stood to make a toast, her voice quivering with feigned emotion. She spoke of family, of unity, of how proud she was of her daughters. My heart lurched at the word daughters, because it was never us. Never equal, it was always Rachel, and then me, a shadow. She gestured for Rachel to speak, and Rachel launched into a speech about sisterhood, her eyes glistening as she proclaimed how much she loved me, how happy she was to be an aunt. The room erupted in applause. I felt sick. Mark whispered in my ear, "Do not let her get to you. This is about you and the baby." Still, I could not ignore the weight pressing down on me, the sense that something more sinister than jealousy was brewing. Rachel moved through the crowd, her hand on my shoulder whenever she passed her voice sweet, but edged with something darker. She introduced me to people I barely knew, describing me as her little sister, as if I were still a child. When I tried to excuse myself for a moment of quiet, she blocked my way with another tray of food. "You must eat, you must drink," she insisted, her insistence disguised as care. By mid-afternoon, exhaustion wrapped around me like a blanket. The noise, the forced smiles, the constant intrusion, it all blurred together. I caught sight of Sophie across the room, her expression tense as if she too sensed danger. I told myself I was imagining it, that pregnancy hormones were making me paranoid. But deep down, I knew. The atmosphere was too controlled, too orchestrated, every detail arranged to place Rachel at the center and me in her shadow. The shower that should have celebrated my child felt like a stage for Rachel's twisted play. As Linda ushered everyone toward the living room for gifts, Rachel once again pressed a drink into my hand. "Go on, you need to stay hydrated," she urged. Her fingers lingered on the glass a moment too long, her eyes gleaming with something I could not name. I hesitated, then lifted it to my lips, trying to quiet the voice inside that screamed no. That moment, that simple sip would change everything. I wish I could say I saw it coming, that I recognized the danger before it was too late. But the truth is, I wanted to believe Rachel was capable of kindness. I wanted to believe my parents could celebrate me without strings attached. That fragile hope betrayed me. The setup was complete, the stage dressed in flowers and ribbons, the players smiling with glasses raised while the trap waited silently in the sweetness of an orange drink. The first swallow of that orange juice seemed harmless, yet almost immediately a strange heaviness settled in my chest, my breath shortened, and the chatter around me felt muffled as if I were sinking underwater. I blinked, trying to clear my vision, but the chandelier above me swayed like a pendulum, its light breaking into fragments that stabbed my eyes. My pulse raced hot and unsteady, and I clutched the arm of the chair to keep myself upright. A laugh rang out across the room, sharp and mocking, though to the guests it was just another burst of party cheer. Rachel leaned in close, her perfume suffocating, and whispered words that cut through the haze like a knife. "This baby will ruin you just like you ruined my life." The malice in her tone pierced deeper than the dizziness consuming me. My fingers went numb, the glass slipped from my hand, and the sticky orange liquid spread across the carpet unnoticed at first amid the noise. Mark's face blurred into focus as he leapt toward me, his hands steadying my shoulders, his voice breaking with panic. "Emily, breathe. Stay with me, please. Breathe." I tried to answer, to tell him what Rachel had done, but the words stuck my tongue, heavy, my throat constricting. I heard gasps, chairs scraping, relatives murmuring. Some rushed forward with tissues, others simply stared wide-eyed at the drama unfolding in the center of the shower. Rachel was the first to kneel beside me, her tone honeyed and false. "Poor Emily," she said loudly. "She always gets so overwhelmed. Pregnancy is hard on her." Her eyes, though, gleamed with satisfaction, a flash of triumph she quickly hid when others looked. Linda pushed through the crowd, one hand pressed to her pearls, her voice high with concern that felt rehearsed. "She is fine. She declared she just needs to rest. Do not panic." Charles followed, booming with authority, his tone dismissive. "She is exaggerating. Stop making a scene. Rachel would never hurt her." Their words fell like stones on my chest, heavier than the poison in my veins. Even now, even as I trembled and gasped, they chose Rachel. They always had. The room tilted violently, my vision tunneling balloons above me, bobbing like mocking faces. I saw Sophie step forward, her eyes narrowing at Rachel, but Linda tugged her back, muttering that too much fuss would only embarrass me. Embarrassment. They cared about appearances more than the life of their daughter and unborn grandchild. Mark's arms slid under me, lifting me from the chair as my knees buckled. "We need an ambulance," he shouted, his voice breaking through the fog. "Someone call 911. Someone." Relatives shifted uneasily, some reaching for phones, others whispering that maybe he was overreacting. Rachel pressed her hand to her mouth in feigned shock, though I caught the curve of a smile when she thought no one was watching. Every breath became a battle, each second stretched into eternity. I clung to one thought, the tiny life inside me, the flutter I had felt so many nights, the promise I had whispered to him. I cannot let her win. I cannot lose him. The sirens wailed in the distance, drawing closer while Mark's hand cradled my face. "Stay with me, Emily. Stay with the baby," he pleaded. I wanted to tell him I heard that I was fighting, but darkness crept closer. The paramedics burst through the door, kneeling beside us, checking my pulse, my breathing strapping me onto a stretcher. Their questions blurred together. Mark answered frantically. Did she ingest anything unusual? Has she had complications? Is there a history? He glanced toward the glass, shattered on the carpet, the sticky stain seeping into the rug. Orange juice. He said she only drank the orange juice Rachel gave her. The paramedic frowned, exchanged a look with his partner, and hurried me out. As the stretcher wheeled past, I saw Rachel's face above the crowd, her expression shifting between practiced worry and the shadow of triumph. My parents hovered near her, comforting her, as if she were the victim. I wanted to scream, "She did this. She poisoned me," but my body betrayed me, too weak to form the words. The doors closed, the sirens wailed again, and the house faded behind me. At the hospital, bright lights pierced my vision. Monitors beeped in urgent rhythm, and strangers' hands moved swiftly over me. Sophie appeared, her face tense but steady. She had followed us, refusing to stay behind. She gripped my hand as doctors worked, whispering that I was safe, that she would not leave. Blood was drawn, IVs inserted, machines whirred. I drifted in and out, caught between panic and exhaustion. When at last the haze lifted enough for me to hear clearly, Sophie leaned close, her voice low but fierce. "Emily, they found traces of sedatives in your blood. Someone tampered with your drink." The words hit me harder than the dizziness. It was not in my head. It was not stress. It was not pregnancy hormones. It was Rachel. Tears slid down my cheeks, not from shock, but from the cruel familiarity of it. My sister had stolen dolls' jackets, opportunities, and dignity. Now she had tried to steal my child, my very life. And still I knew my parents would defend her. The betrayal was layered, not just Rachel's act, but the certainty of my parents' denial, the inevitability of their gaslighting. I felt Mark's hand on my shoulder, trembling, but strong. "We will not let her get away with this," he said. His eyes held rage I had never seen before. In the sterile hospital room with wires attached to my body and my child's heartbeat thudding faintly on a monitor, I vowed silently, "This ends here." Rachel may have poisoned my drink, but I would not let her poison my future. My parents may dismiss me, but I would gather truth, build evidence, and confront them in a way they could not deny. The baby shower had been her stage, her moment of power, but she had underestimated me. She had underestimated what a mother will do to protect her child. The betrayal had shattered something fragile inside me, yet in the shards lay a new kind of strength. I was no longer just Emily, the overlooked daughter, the scapegoat, the shadow. I was Emily, the mother, carrying a life worth fighting for. And I would fight not in whispers, not in secret, but in the open, with witnesses, with proof, with justice. That night, as the machines beeped steadily and Sophie dozed in a chair beside me, I closed my eyes and saw Rachel's smirk, my parents' denial, and Mark's desperate face. The image seared into my memory. The baby shower had become the stage for my sister's cruelty, but the curtain had not fallen yet. I would write the ending, and it would not be hers. The hospital room smelled of antiseptic and faint lavender from the hand lotion Sophie had rubbed onto my dry palms. Machines beeped steadily, the monitor beside me showing the flicker of my baby's heartbeat. Relief washed through me every time I heard it, proof that he was still alive, still fighting even after Rachel's betrayal. Yet relief was tangled with rage, fear, and a gnawing doubt that would not release its grip. My parents had dismissed the incident as nerves, Rachel had painted me as hysterical, and part of me feared the world would believe them. After all, hadn't they convinced me for years that I was overreacting, that my pain was exaggeration, that my anger was selfishness? The familiar cycle of gaslighting echoed in my mind, their voices louder than the steady beeps of the monitor. Mark sat beside me, his hands clasped tightly, his jaw tense. Every so often he glanced at me as if afraid I might vanish. "We need to tell the police," he said, his voice low but firm. Sophie nodded in agreement, her eyes fierce. "Emily, this was not an accident. The blood test showed sedatives. This was deliberate." My throat tightened. "I know it was Rachel," I whispered, my voice cracking. She leaned down and hissed at me. She wanted me to lose the baby. Mark's face hardened with fury. but when the door opened and Linda entered, her expression dripping with rehearsed worry, his anger turned into icy silence. "Oh, sweetheart," she said, her voice trembling. "We were so frightened. Thank God you and the baby are safe." Her hand reached for mine, but I pulled it back. "Mother," I said, "Rachel did this. She put something in my drink." Linda's smile faltered for a moment before she shook her head. "Emily, you must not say such things. Rachel loves you. She planned this entire shower for you. She would never." My chest burned with disbelief. Even here, with medical proof, with my body weak from what her daughter had done, she chose denial. Charles arrived minutes later, his voice booming as if volume could erase truth. "You embarrassed the entire family, Emily, accusing your sister on such a day you nearly ruined everything." I stared at him, words tumbling inside me. I almost lost my child. I wanted to scream, but my voice came out calm and sharp instead. "Father, the doctors found sedatives in my blood." His eyes narrowed, then flickered away as if truth were an inconvenience he refused to entertain. "Families stand together," he said flatly. "Rachel would never poison you." He turned to Mark, trying to assert authority. "Keep her calm. Son pregnancy can play tricks on the mind." Mark stood abruptly, his chair scraping. "No," he said, his voice shaking with restrained rage. "This is not in her mind. This is attempted harm, and if you will not protect your daughter, I will." My parents left soon after muttering about ungratefulness, their faces masks of wounded pride. The silence they left behind felt heavier than their presence. Tears spilled down my cheeks, anger mixing with despair. "They will never believe me," I whispered. Sophie leaned forward, her grip steady on my arm. "You do not need them to believe, you only need proof, and you already have it." She explained that the hospital had documented the presence of sedatives, that it was recorded in my medical file. If Rachel had hoped her act would vanish under excuses, she had miscalculated. Over the next hours, detectives visited briefly, taking preliminary notes, asking about what I drank, who gave it to me, whether I had enemies. My voice shook as I answered, naming Rachel, describing her whisper. They nodded, said the toxicology report would be crucial, and promised to follow up. When they left, exhaustion weighed on me, but inside, a spark of determination glowed. For years, Rachel had stolen without consequence. My parents had denied without hesitation, but this time would be different. This time, I had science witnesses and the raw evidence of my body's collapse. Still, doubt haunted me. What if the police dismissed it as a family quarrel? What if Rachel twisted the story until I seemed the villain? I had seen her do it before, tears falling on cue, her voice trembling with just the right note of victimhood. I remembered every time my parents had believed her over me, every time relatives had rolled their eyes when I tried to speak the truth. My mind churned with fear that the cycle would repeat, that justice would slip through my fingers. Yet every time I looked at the monitor and saw the heartbeat of my son, I knew surrender was not an option. Mark pressed his forehead against mine that night, his voice a steady anchor. "Emily, you are not alone. This time, we will fight this together." His words wrapped around me like armor, shielding me from the doubt. Sophie added her own promise, her voice unwavering. "I will testify. I will stand in court if I have to." She said, "Rachel will not destroy you. Not now. Not ever." The aftermath of betrayal was a battlefield of emotions. Disbelief, rage, grief, and resolve colliding inside me. My parents' denial cut deeply. Rachel's cruelty threatened everything, but the discovery of sedatives in my blood changed the balance. I had proof, undeniable proof, and though doubt gnawed at me, determination rose stronger. Rachel had chosen her stage at my baby shower, but the curtain had only just risen. The real confrontation, the one she could not twist or deny, was coming, and I would be ready. The days after my hospital release were a blur of fatigue, nausea, and restless nights. But beneath the exhaustion simmered a determination I had never felt before. I knew I could not confront Rachel with rage alone. She thrived in chaos. She fed off my outbursts, and my parents always twisted those moments into proof that I was unstable. If I wanted justice, I needed to be methodical, calm, and strategic. Mark sat with me at the kitchen table one evening, papers spread before us, his brow furrowed as he listed options. We file a police report. We secure Sophie's medical testimony. We gather every message Rachel has ever sent you. I nodded, my mind racing already, imagining Rachel's smug denial and my parents' dismissive sneers. But for the first time in my life, I realized I had allies who would not waver. Sophie arrived the next morning with her laptop and copies of my medical records. She explained how the toxicology results clearly indicated sedatives, how the levels were too concentrated to be accidental, how any reasonable doctor would confirm deliberate tampering. Her words steadied me. Her presence reminded me that truth was on my side. Together, we compiled every text Rachel had sent over the past months, messages dripping with resentment and veiled threats. One stood out like a flashing warning. "You don't deserve that baby, Emily. You will never be strong enough to be a mother." Seeing it again made my stomach clench, but it was evidence undeniable and damning. Mark contacted his college friend, a lawyer named Daniel Harper, who specialized in assault cases. Daniel listened patiently as I recounted every detail, his pen scribbling across yellow paper. When I faltered, when memories threatened to choke me, he urged gently, "Do not hold back, Emily. The smallest detail matters." He explained that family cases were tricky, that Rachel would likely claim jealousy was exaggeration, that my parents might testify against me, but with solid evidence and credible witnesses, we could build a case strong enough to withstand their lies. His calm professionalism gave me hope. For years I had fought alone. Now I had a team. We installed cameras in our apartment, changed locks, and shifted my finances into new accounts under tight security. Mark insisted on driving me everywhere, his protective presence both comforting and humbling. At night, I lay awake, my hand resting on my belly, whispering to my son that his life had already changed mine, that I would not let his aunt's bitterness steal his future. Anger still burned hot, but I began to channel it into preparation, into careful steps rather than reckless confrontation. One afternoon, I called Rachel from a blocked number, my voice trembling as I baited her into conversation. I told her I was weak, that I feared I would not survive childbirth, that maybe she was right about the baby ruining me. I let silence stretch heart-pounding, and then I heard it, her laugh, sharp and triumphant. "Maybe now you understand," she said. "Maybe now you know what it feels like to lose." I ended the call quickly, my hands shaking, but Mark had already recorded it, capturing her gloating words. Another piece of the puzzle, another shard of truth to pierce her lies. Despite progress, doubt still haunted me, especially when my parents called. Linda's voice was syrupy, urging me to forgive, warning that stress was bad for the baby. Charles thundered about family loyalty, insisting that Rachel was under pressure, that I should not destroy our family over a misunderstanding. I listened quietly, recording every word, storing them as reminders that their loyalty had never been mine to count on. Each call strengthened my resolve, showing me that I could never change them, only protect myself from their poison. By the end of the week, Daniel had prepared a preliminary case file, Sophie had drafted her medical affidavit, and Mark had organized the digital evidence. We were ready, or as ready as one can be, before facing a sister who smiled while poisoning you. Intelligent resistance meant more than survival. It meant patience, discipline, and refusing to let rage blind me. Rachel wanted me frantic. She wanted me silenced by doubt, but I was done playing her role. I would not storm her house screaming. I would not beg my parents for belief. I would let evidence speak louder than my tears. Late one night, as I sat at the table reviewing documents under the soft glow of the lamp, Mark placed a hand on my shoulder. "Emily," he said, his voice steady, "this is the beginning of the end," and for the first time since the baby shower collapsed into chaos, I believed him. The courthouse smelled faintly of dust and old wood polish, its tall ceilings echoing with the shuffling of papers and the murmur of voices. I sat at the plaintiff's table, my palms damp, despite Mark's steady hand clasped around mine. The weeks of preparation had led to this, the day Rachel would finally be forced to face what she had done, not in whispers behind closed doors, not through gaslighting in our parents' living room, but in the cold light of the law where evidence spoke louder than denial. Sophie sat behind me, her presence like a shield, her testimony prepared and precise. Daniel shuffled his notes beside me, calm as ever, reminding me to breathe, to trust the process. Across the aisle, Rachel sat with her attorney, her expression the picture of innocence. She wore a pale pink blouse, her hair tied neatly, her eyes glistening as if rehearsed tears already waited. My parents sat directly behind her, their faces hard and cold, their loyalty displayed like a banner. When Rachel glanced at me, her lips curved in the faintest smirk as though she still believed she could twist reality to her will. The judge entered the room, rose, and the proceedings began. My heart hammered as the charges were read, attempted poisoning, assault on a pregnant woman, endangerment of a child. Hearing the words spoken aloud was both terrifying and liberating. It was real now, no longer just a nightmare I had endured in silence. Daniel stood, his voice steady, outlining the case, presenting the timeline, explaining the medical evidence. He laid the toxicology report on the table for the judge to see, the numbers stark and undeniable. Rachel's attorney objected, claiming stress and hormones made me unreliable, but the judge waved him down. Then Sophie took the stand, her voice clear as she explained how the sedatives had entered my system, how the dosages were too concentrated to be accidental, how the timing matched the collapse at my baby shower. She did not falter when Rachel's attorney tried to undermine her. She did not waver when my parents glared from the benches. She spoke only truth. Every word cutting through the fog Rachel had spun. When it was my turn, I rose slowly, my legs trembling, but my voice stronger than I expected. I described the baby shower, the drink pressed into my hand, the bitterness in my throat, the dizziness that followed. I told them about Rachel leaning down, her whisper like venom, "This baby will ruin you." The courtroom hushed, the silence heavy, and I saw the judge's gaze sharpen. Rachel's attorney leapt to his feet, shouting, "Objection, hearsay," but Daniel calmly reminded the court that my words were corroborated by the toxicology report and by Sophie's testimony. Then, he played the recording Mark had captured, Rachel's own laugh spilling into the room, followed by her words dripping with triumph. "Maybe now you understand. Maybe now you know what it feels like to lose." Gasps echoed from the benches. Even the clerk's eyes widened. Rachel's face drained of color. Her attorney shifted uncomfortably, and for the first time I saw her mask crack. But the most shocking moment came when Mark took the stand. He spoke not only of what he witnessed that day, his wife collapsing, his fear that he might lose both her and their child, but of the years he had watched my family dismiss me, belittle me, deny every cry for help. He told the court how Rachel's cruelty was not sudden, how it had festered for years, and how my parents had enabled her every step of the way. His voice broke when he described kneeling beside me on the floor, begging me to breathe, hearing Rachel's false concern, even as he saw the glint of satisfaction in her eyes. His pain was raw, his anger real, and the courtroom leaned in, hanging on every word. Rachel's defense was pitiful in comparison. She cried, claiming I had always been jealous that stress made me hallucinate, that the recording was taken out of context. She said she only wanted to help, that she would never harm her sister. And my parents nodded furiously, shouting from the benches until the judge silenced them. Charles declared I was destroying the family. Linda sobbed that I had been unstable since childhood, but their outbursts only revealed their bias, their desperation to shield Rachel from consequence. The judge's expression grew harder with each interruption, the gavel striking until the room obeyed. The climax came when Daniel presented the final piece of evidence, the medical records showing not only the sedatives in my blood, but the trace amounts found on the rim of the glass recovered from the baby shower. A forensic expert testified, confirming the presence, confirming intent. It was undeniable. Rachel's face crumpled, her tears, no longer performative but panicked, her hands trembling as she gripped the table. She turned to my parents, whispering frantically, but they stared back in stunned silence, their certainty shattered. For once, denial was not enough. For once, the truth could not be drowned beneath gaslighting. The judge recessed to consider, the courtroom buzzing with murmurs, and I sat frozen, my heart pounding, tears streaming down my cheeks. Mark held me tightly. Sophie squeezed my shoulder, and Daniel leaned close. "You did it, Emily. You stood strong. Whatever happens now, you've already won." His words pierced through the fear, reminding me that the exposure itself was victory. No longer hidden, no longer silenced, Rachel's cruelty was laid bare for all to see. When the judge returned, the room fell silent. He spoke with measured authority, citing the evidence, the testimony, the recordings. He declared Rachel guilty of attempted harm, guilty of endangerment, guilty of betrayal, not just of her sister, but of the sanctity of family. He ordered sentencing to follow, but the verdict alone sent a wave of shock through the benches. My parents sat rigid, their faces pale, their loyalty suddenly powerless. Rachel buried her face in her hands, her sobs echoing in the chamber, no longer the tears of manipulation, but of defeat. As the gavel struck one final time, I felt a weight lift from my chest. The confrontation was not only mine, it was public, undeniable, irreversible. My truth was no longer a fragile whisper. It was a matter of record, a judgment carved into history. For the first time in decades, I was not the liar, not the hysterical daughter, not the scapegoat. I was Emily, a woman who had survived, resisted, and exposed the poison that had haunted her life. The room emptied slowly, people whispering as they passed, some offering sympathetic glances, others shaking their heads at the audacity of Rachel's cruelty. I remained seated, my hand resting on my belly, feeling my son's gentle kick, a reminder that this fight was not just for me, but for him. The confrontation had ended, but the consequences were only beginning. The days following the verdict moved both quickly and unbearably slow. Each hour waited with a strange mixture of relief and dread. Rachel was taken into custody pending sentencing, and the image of her being led away, wrists cuffed, still played on repeat in my mind. It wasn't triumph I felt, not exactly, but something deeper, something heavier, like a wound had finally been cleaned even though the scar would remain forever. Mark stayed close, guarding me in ways both physical and emotional, guiding me to rest when my body trembled from exhaustion, reminding me that the battle was over, even as echoes of my parents' shouts still rang in my ears. Sophie visited often, her presence grounding, and one evening she looked me squarely in the eyes and said, "Emily, you did what so many victims of family cruelty cannot. You stood in the light and you refused to let their lies bury you." Her words sank deep, wrapping around the fractures inside me, offering strength. Rachel's sentencing came 2 weeks later. The courtroom was quieter this time, emptier too, but my parents still sat rigid in the gallery, their disapproval radiating like poison. The judge spoke firmly, outlining the danger Rachel had posed, the deliberate act of slipping sedatives into my drink, the life-threatening risk she had inflicted on both me and my unborn child. She was sentenced to several years in prison with eligibility for early release contingent on therapy and rehabilitation. Rachel wept openly this time, not the crocodile tears she wielded like weapons, but raw, frightened sobs. I watched her, feeling an ache I could not name, sorrow for the sister I once thought I had, sorrow for the family we might have been. Yet beneath it there was clarity. Consequences were not cruelty, they were truth taking shape. My parents refused to look at me as the gavel fell, and when we stepped into the hallway, Linda hissed under her breath, "You've destroyed this family." I paused, meeting her eyes, feeling decades of fear burn away. "No, Mom," I replied, voice steady. "Rachel destroyed it the moment she decided my baby's life was expendable." For once, Charles had no thunderous retort. His jaw clenched, his silence louder than any words. They turned away, clutching each other as though I were the enemy, and I understood then that reconciliation was a mirage I could no longer chase. The months that followed were quieter but not empty. Mark and I prepared for the baby's arrival with cautious joy, decorating a small nursery with soft blue walls and tiny shelves filled with storybooks. Every brushstroke, every folded onesie felt like a declaration of hope, a promise that my son's childhood would not echo the cruelty of mine. Sophie remained a constant, guiding me through postpartum anxiety workshops, reminding me that trauma doesn't vanish with a verdict, that healing is a slow, uneven climb. I listened. I cried. I kept moving. When my son Ethan was born, the world shifted. Holding him against my chest, feeling his fragile breath, I whispered vows into his tiny ear. "You will know love without condition. You will know family without fear. You will never feel like a burden." Tears soaked my cheeks, but they were not only tears of pain, they were cleansing, they were rebirth. Mark wept beside me, his hand stroking Ethan's head, and in that moment I knew that the legacy of cruelty stopped here. It would not pass through me to him. Yet healing came with shadows, too. I dreamed often of the baby shower, of Rachel's smirk, of my parents' cold denial. Sometimes I woke drenched in sweat, my heart racing, convinced that Rachel was standing over Ethan's crib. Mark would pull me close, whispering that we were safe, that locks and cameras and distance were barriers Rachel could no longer cross. Slowly the panic eased, not vanishing but shrinking, replaced by something sturdier, something resembling peace. As Ethan grew, so did my sense of purpose. I began volunteering at a local women's center, sharing fragments of my story with others who bore the weight of family betrayal. I spoke not only of Rachel's actions, but of the years of erasure and gaslighting, of the strength it took to believe in my own truth when everyone around me insisted I was weak. Each time I spoke, I saw recognition in the eyes of strangers, women nodding, tears slipping silently, and I understood that my story was not mine alone. It was part of a larger tapestry of survival, resistance, and rebirth. My parents never visited Ethan, never called to ask about his milestones, never acknowledged his existence. It hurt, yes, but it also clarified. Love is proven in actions, not in titles. Rachel's absence loomed too, her letters from prison arriving once every few months, apologies scrawled in uneven handwriting, declarations of regret. I read them, sometimes wept over them, but I never replied. Forgiveness is not erasure, and trust once shattered does not easily mend. Perhaps one day, years from now, I would sit across from her and see sincerity. But for now, protecting Ethan and myself meant maintaining distance. The resolution was not fairy tale perfect. It was not reconciliation wrapped in a bow. But it was freedom. I had carved out a space where my voice mattered, where my truth stood unshaken, where my son would grow knowing that love could be fierce, protective, and unyielding. Rachel's sentence was a reminder that actions have consequences. My parents' silence, a reminder that denial builds walls no verdict can dismantle. But in my home, laughter replaced shouting, warmth replaced suspicion, and Ethan's giggles rang like bells in rooms once heavy with fear. One evening, as I rocked Ethan to sleep, his tiny fingers curling around mine, I whispered to him the lesson I had learned through pain and perseverance. Family is not defined by blood, but by love, by those who choose you, protect you, stand with you when storms come. You, my son, will always know family in its truest form. His breathing slowed, his eyelids fluttered shut, and as I watched him drift into dreams, I felt a peace I never thought possible. The cycle had been broken, the poison exposed, and though scars remained, they were proof of survival, not chains of the past. I was Emily, daughter of a toxic family, sister to a betrayer, but also mother to a child who would grow up in the light. My story was not only one of pain, but of resilience, not only of betrayal, but of triumph. And as the night deepened outside, I held Ethan close, knowing with unshakable certainty that the worst was behind us, and the future, though still fragile, belonged to us alone. Looking back now with Ethan's laughter filling the rooms that once echoed with my own childhood silence, I realized that my journey was not simply about survival. It was about reclaiming truth from the ruins of lies. For years, I was told I was weak, unstable, dramatic, unworthy of being believed. My parents' words sank deep, shaping the way I saw myself, convincing me that Rachel's cruelty was sibling rivalry, that my pain was exaggeration, that my fear was foolishness. But standing in that courtroom, speaking my truth without trembling, hearing the judge affirm what I had always known, I felt chains that had bound me since childhood break. It was not only Rachel who faced judgment, it was the entire system of silence and denial that had smothered me for decades. There are days when I still grieve. I grieve the sister I once wanted, the mother who never chose me, the father whose love was measured in control and anger. I grieve the holidays that ended in tears, the birthdays overshadowed by Rachel's demands, the countless nights I cried alone, believing I was defective. Yet grief no longer owns me. It moves through me like passing weather, leaving space for sunlight. Mark's steady presence, Sophie's fierce loyalty, Ethan's unfiltered joy, They are proof that family can be chosen, that healing can grow in unexpected soil. Sometimes people ask if I hate Rachel, if I want her to rot in prison forever. The truth is more complicated. Hatred burns too hot, it consumes the one who holds it, and I refuse to give her that power. What I feel instead is sorrow mixed with clarity. Rachel made her choice, and choices have consequences. She tried to shatter me, but in doing so, she exposed herself. She sought control, but in the end, she lost it all. My forgiveness, if it ever comes, will not erase what she did. It will not restore trust. Forgiveness will simply be another step in setting myself free. To other women who might hear my story, who sit in kitchens trembling while family members dismiss their cries, I say this: you are not crazy. You are not weak. Your pain is not imaginary. Gaslighting is violence. Silence is complicity. Denial is its own form of betrayal. Speak, even if your voice shakes. Seek allies, even if they are outside your bloodline. Protect yourself, even when those who should protect you will not. The truth may take years to be seen, but when it is finally exposed, it has the power to break the cycle. As I hold Ethan now, watching him discover the world with wonder instead of fear, I know the legacy of cruelty ends with me. He will not inherit it. He will not live under its shadow. His childhood will be defined by love, not control, by encouragement, not dismissal. That is my victory, the quiet revolution born from pain. I am not only Emily, the daughter of a toxic family. I am Emily, mother of a boy who will know freedom, and that is enough.